So I will give a brief introduction about the material in Enscape, which I found is quite useful compared to the Rhino material in the Rhino. So let's start with some, like the place where I found the texture image is called the textures.com. So basically you can go in here, like click the latest texture, and they have like categories over here. So it's pretty useful. Let's see if like for concrete. So there's like several categories. Just download anyone you like feel like interested, and there's like seamless texture. So which is pretty useful for rendering if you don't have time to go through all the textures online, and some are paid. Don't you have like 15 credits each day? Like one download only costs 1 credit. So it's pretty useful when you need like some texture. And they have like all the, I think they have the natural section, so they have like cutouts for you if you want to use Photoshop or something. So that's where I basically look for textures. So let's jump into Rhino. So that's a basic material bar in the scene. So it will show the material. So to start with the new material, let's click the icon over here. Click the item, the surface you want to add material, and click to the material tab. And here, it's like the basic info for the material. So you will have the default material as set default. You want to create a new material, just like click here, and you will like do custom glass, metal, paint, picture. Those are basic. If you want to save some time, just use like the preset material. And if you want to have like more control of the material, just do custom, which I always go to. So let's start with the concrete. Let's use this one. So to adjust material in Enscape, there's a tab here. It's called Tune Material in this project. Just open that, and you will find all the Enscape material in here. Let's click this one. So to add material, so you need to add a texture. Basically, it's just fine. Just add the image of the texture here, and you will apply to it. So, but if we want to, let's see if I switch the light to give it more. Like, ah, that's the basic. It's such as a pure image. So the concrete is supposed to have some bump, and it's not a perfect surface. So what we will do is like add a bump texture. Just click use the albedo, so it will create a nice bump texture to create a rough surface. So if you think it's too rough, just reduce the amount here and give it time to update. And you can also set value here. I would think it's like 0.5, good enough. And also you need to, there's like reflection on all the surface. So remember to add reflection on the concrete also. So you will have like a smooth, but there a bumpy reflection over here. So it's like create more realistic texture on here. And the specular is like the more you have, the more reflective you have. It's like more reflection you have. Turn to 0. It's like it's not that dramatic anymore. So that's concrete. And let's do brick. So it's basically the same for when you add the texture albedo here and bump. For bump map, I would suggest you go into the, yeah, so go to Photoshop to try to create a bump map by yourself. Just like creating all like the, how to say, the deep area into black using the curve or level tools. So create a depth field so it can generate the like the seam and also the imperfection on the bricks we are showing in the renderings. And so also have the reflection here on each material. Let's switch to marble. Switch it. So this is the marble texture I created. So it's basically just because it's almost like a smooth surface, so it's only have a texture and a reflection here and reduce the specular. Otherwise, it's like too smooth. It look like a mirror over here. So it's like around 40%. Be a very good amount and have the all that reflection kept. And metal. So it's the chrome metal here. And to adjust the color here, you just need to adjust the color here. You will update with the material like the brass or something. And one thing about the metal I found quite useful is, so there's like we use like a metal panel here. So I will add a texture, add a grid over here, and add a bump. So you will create a metal panel, like just using the texture without like you need to create each panel by yourself. And there's another thing I want to talk about in here is like, so if you don't want to create the perfect metal panel because there are always some scratch on the panels here, so find it's called like scratch map, which I found it on the same website, the texture.com. It's in overlays. So you have like all the overlays, like the dirt map, those kind of scratches you want, find here and just put it on the metal. It's too extreme. That's 0.25. Also add the roughness here. So you will create a metal with like a small imperfection on it, which gives people a more realistic looking for it. Let's see what else I have here. So, oh, glass. So talking about glass, using glass in the Enscape material is kind of pain in the ass. So I would just use the basic Rhino material to create a glass, which gives us a more better looking than the Enscape material. So that's the glass material. So if you want to just choose when you create a material here, just choose glass and give it a color over here and turn the IOR to 1.6, which is the refraction amount for the glass is always 1.6. So that's the look of the glass. And when we try to switch the time, so you can see the reflection and the depth of the glass. So when you create the glass, always create it in the volume rather than one surface. Otherwise, you won't have the reflection, the distortion on the glass. And that's the transparent glass. For the frosted glass, just do not choose the glass material in the Rhino. Choose a custom material and like just change the transparency here. You will have a better like, look for the semi-transparent glass other than the frosted glass. I think the Inkscape won't work with the glass, the frosted glass here. I don't know why, but like, right, drag it to here. It's like it's the same material. Some time to update. So there's like no transparency to it at all. Okay. What else? Oh, wood. So the same texture, bump, and the reflection, it applies to all the material. Just tune in the specular and the bump amount. You will have a very good material in Inkscape. And for landscape use, we use grass. It's just a basic grass material. Try and find a grass JPEG here. It's like this one. And just you can add some bumps, but I don't think it will do much difference. And just change the height settings, change the grass height. That's basically it for the grass color. There's a tint color. So if you want to change the grass color, just like add a tint color, you will like tint it a little bit different. And water. So when creating the water, the surface in Inkscape, the water is just by itself. It's a layer. It doesn't like do. It's just a layer of a material. So when you create a water, you need to create a bottom for it. Otherwise, you won't have the reflection and refraction over here. So just remember when you create a water, a pond or a pool, always create a bottom and add texture to it. It will have a good look. And in the Inkscape settings, you can adjust the water color over here and like the wind intensity, which will create more drastic effect and angle of the water and wave, those kind of settings. You can like play with it to see if which one will fit your need better. So that's the basic material I have here. Oh, there's a fence material. Let me try to. For fence, you just need to find a transparent PNG over here to apply it and have the transparent fence around this area. It's basically, let me try to open this image. So it's just a plain PNG with like some, just crop the things you don't need and leave whatever you want here, and you will have the fence material. You don't need to build it anything. And that's everything I have for material. And there's so I found online there's a test thing. So I applied all my material over here. So it's basically a test model for you when you want to apply material. So that's the concrete, the semi-transparent glass, the transparent glass, the bricks, the marbles, the wood, and the water. and the grass. Yeah, that's what I have for the material. Next, onto Tokai.
Okay. Thanks, Ray, for the introductions on how to prepare your model for Enscape rendering. And I'll be talking about how you sum up the basic commands and the navigation and a different way you can use your Enscape model. Let me share my screen really quick. Okay, do you guys see my screen now?
Yeah, we do.
Got it. Thank you. So, okay, so after you prep the model, assign a material in Rhino, or this could also be done in SketchUp or Revit. So you can start your rendering with Enscape. So to initiate it, Enscape, you just click this yellow cube with a green arrow, and Enscape window will pop up. And you are gonna see this window. So basically what you're seeing here is the same view as what you're showing on a screen, and with all the material you applied through Rhino or SketchUp or Revit. So the basic navigation here is very similar to most of the model engines and also some of the gaming design. So it's, if you press H, this little cheat sheet bar is gonna pop up and you're gonna see all the command you're gonna use in Enscape. So you have, you can use WSAD to move, and also EQ to moving vertically. So if you, like right now, I'm moving very slow because I'm very far away from the model. So what you can do is you can press the shift key and press the arrow, your WSAD key, that will allow you to move quicker, or using the control key to speed up even more. And if you want to really quick, you can press control and shift together, and using your arrow key, that will give you a very quick move if you're in aerial mode. Or another way to navigate, if you want to move to a specific point, you can just double click on a model that will allow you to teleport to the location. So next, we can actually changing the light condition in the model. So what you see here is we have a pretty dark model. So to change the time, I can use the right key with shift. That way allow me to change the time of the day, so I can get a live rendering of the shadow and the lighting condition to see how the sun will affect the design, or simulating the solar heat gain during summer. And the one thing to notice, because here when I move the view, you can see the building get distorted quite a bit. That's because I have my perspective view enabled. So to get rid of that, or to be more render friendly, you want all the line to be perpendicular or straight. So you just turn on the 2-point perspective. That way it can give you a true straight line across the building, which will save you some time doing post-processing. And also sometime when you're doing rendering, you want to make sure you're on eye level, you're on eye level. So to make sure you are at eye level on every view, you just make sure you're in walk mode when you're doing your rendering. So during walk mode, you can move vertically, so you're always moving along a surface, and your eye is always on the right level. But you can change it from like 5 feet, 10 feet. You can change that in the setting, but basically the walk mode will anchor you to the ground. You can still look around, but you can't fly around like what you have in fly mode, where you can basically walk through the wall or just convert to a aerial view. So that's kind of the basic command in basic navigation command in Enscape. And apparently one of the most common use way of rendering is rendering still images. So Enscape can do that easily. So you just basically go to your Enscape capturing and just click the first command, which will render you a image. But before you render the still image, there are some settings you might want to look at. All the settings are here under Enscape tab. There's a setting called visual setting. This is where you can be a little bit more creative and create your own style of renderings. So there are different modes that we can choose from. The first one is none. Basically, that will review the true material you assign in your Rhino or SketchUp or Revit model, basically what you see is going to be the material you see here is going to be what you're assigned in your program. In the second view mode might be useful is the white mode, which is basically getting rid of all the material, but only keeping the reflection of the glass. So if you use this with the outline, you can get a pretty good base for your diagram to show your concept. And also to work with that, some of the time we want to use axometric view. So also the third option from the view mode you see here allow you to convert to a true axometric view, axon view. So that allow you to get a pretty good base to draw your diagrams. And also the same thing, you can change the lighting condition here to get more extreme or to get a visual setting you want for your base of the image. And the third mode I want to show is a light view, where it basically calculating the sunlight for you and give you this pretty straightforward map showing the light condition or the solar peaking during different time of the day. So it could be useful for a shadow study where you see how the shadow will impact different building. And also, it could be also useful when you're inside of the building. So it also works when you're inside of the building. Sorry, I lost myself. Okay, so where you're in the building, you can also turn on the light view, which will give you a quick illustrations of, again, how the light is going to impact the building and also how many sunlight you get in the day. So for orientation or massing study, this is going to be helpful for you to determine whether the building is sufficient to get enough sunlight into the building at a specific time. So the next feature that I want to mention in the visual setting is going to be the field of view. Apparently, this is where you can get really distorted view and very exaggerated to get some amazing shots. But also, you can also turn it to very low to get some close-up shots. So this is something you want to play around with to get better visual for each image. So normally, personally, I started with around 90 and go from 80 to 100. But also, this is totally up to you. But I mean, I'll definitely play around with FOV before you do the renderings, because normally you will have some really good results. Just playing around with it and having different FOV, field of view will definitely bring some more dynamic to your image. So about rendering quality, rendering quality, there's only four settings. I really only use two of them. The reason is if you turn it to dropped view, there's only going to render direct sunlight. So any reflection and refraction will not be rendered. So when you turn it to medium, there's Enscape ray tracing or track tracing, that's the Enscape term, will gonna kick in and you're gonna start to see some realistic rendering. And if you turn it to high, you're gonna start to see more reflection in the scene. So it's just gonna look more realistic. For ultra setting, it's gonna use not one, but two bounces of light ray to calculate the reflection. But I personally don't think that makes huge of a difference, but it will increase the rendering time quite a bit. So I would recommend start from the medium if you want to see some quick result, and for final result, you can just use high, which will basically give you the same result as ultra, but save you a lot of time. The next Suits tab is where you can really change the visual. So you can change the highlight, shadow, visual effect, temperature. If you use any other render engine, you will be knowing these settings. So I'm going to skip all that. One thing to mention here, the horizon. So you can use, there's like different environmental maps here in Enscape, but I would suggest you download a HDR using for Skybox, which will basically give you, which is the most easy way to identify your image from Enscape. So you can download a very dark scene, maybe a sunrise, or just like maybe you want to see a specific color on the sky. So using a Skybox would be the easiest way to achieve the effect you wanted. But I mean, one thing to remember that if you use Skybox, it's easy to get some unwanted element in your background, like a light pole or a huge tree or I don't know, some like context building. So you want to use the rotation to make sure you have the perfect background for each view, or you can just turn on the white background to totally eliminate all the background from the HDR, but only using the HDR as a way to get reflection for the glass and also bring additional light source to your image. So capture, this is where it's the most important part for still image rendering. So you can apparently set your own resolution. You can use window resolution, which will capture your window. So if you have a perfect view you already set up, you can just render the window size. But I don't really recommend that way because your window might get changed easily. So if you have a, for instance, if you render on a different machine, different computer, your Enscape window might be in a different size. So I would recommend you always type in your own resolution. That way you can make sure all the image come out with the same frame. One thing to notice, the biggest rendering Enscape render is 8192 by 8192. So it's pretty large, but it also take a lot of time. So I would say for each purposes, you might want to choose a lower resolution to fasten or to improve the rendering time. One thing to mention is the different depth channel, which is really useful if you ever want to do any post-processing in Photoshop. So I would encourage you to turn it on all the time. And also the depth range will only affect the depth channel, which could also be used as an alpha channel. But I mean, you don't necessarily need this, but also because the material ID could also be used as an alpha channel since it has a dark all the way in the background. So I won't really bother messing up with the depth range. But except you want to creating some depth effect, you can really spend some time manipulating the depth range that will give you a depth channel, which could add something really dramatic effect to your image. Something other to mention is you also have your video setting and panorama setting here, which we'll be covering later. So basically, after all those settings, you can go back to your Enscape capturing and just click the first button and you are able to render a still image. That's the first way you can use Enscape for visual study. So the second thing I want to mention is the video or the short animation. Basically, you see here, Enscape can render anytime between 25 to 100 frames per second, and also 120 will be a huge process. It will take tons of time. So normally 30 frames a second would be good enough. And there's also different setting for video quality. You can choose accordingly, but to set up your video, it's also quite simple. If you just go to your model. So basically, you just need to press K, stand for video editor here as you see in the bottom. There are two ways you can set up your video. So the first one is going to be, let me just remove everything. So the first one will be basically you're creating a path yourself. So I can just say, you can just add keyframe and move around the model and just add more keyframes. And basically this way you can have, basically Enscape will create a path to connect different views. You see the passes here. So what you do is you just press preview and the video it's playing. It's very slow because the duration I haven't changed, but I mean, if you go to each individual frame, you can change how long this frame, how smooth the transition is going to be, or how long it's going to take to achieve this transition. So basically, if I change it to very quickly, I'll do it in 5 seconds, and I'll change the rest of the frame also to 5 seconds to make this whole animation within 20 seconds. I'm just going to very quickly change the durations of this animation back to 20 seconds. Okay, so now if I play this animation, it will be pretty quick. So basically, in this way, Enscape will basically follow the movement of your camera and creating an animation for you. So you can also change the time or the shadow and also the visual settings in here. So the way to do that, if you just go to individual frame And you can see the time of day settings right here. So if there's a specific moment you want to capture as your open scene, you can achieve it from here. And also you can change the field of view settings for your video as well. The one thing just so you know, those two settings will be affect to the whole model. So it will affect not only your keyframe, but also all the frames. So make sure you check other frames to see if your settings are capable for the whole animation, not only for this keyframe. So that's the first way you can do an animation. The second way, if you have some specific view you want to capture, or there's something you already have rendered and you just want to have an animation so you can stitch them together, you can always start it from your view. So basically, you can use your view as a keyframe. So those are the view I pre-saved for this project. So I can just add a keyframe. I can just go to my second view, and I can just add another keyframe. That way, it's going to capture the same view, and Enscape is gonna make the paths basically to blend those two views together. So that's the second way. I'm just gonna add one more. So again, you can control how long this animation is gonna be through this timestamp panel to control the durations of this animation. I'm also just gonna make it within 1 minute so we can get some quick result. Okay, so here if I play this animation, it's just gonna transitioning from the pre-saved view, and it's gonna make an animation to stitch those views together. Okay, so that's the second thing I want to cover is making animation in Enscape. The third one that I want to talk, sometimes, especially doing presentation, you don't necessarily want to have a model opened, but also you want to show the model in live. So Enscape has a feature called Standalone Model. It has two versions. One is right here. So there's like two versions. One is, so basically the difference is like so what it does is like it will pack the whole model into one file. So you can copy and paste to any other machine. You can send it to a client. You can review on another machine. So that file itself contains all the material and all the scene and all the lighting condition texture in there. It's just creating a simple standalone model so you can click on from any other computer. So the difference, there's two ways you can do it. The first way you can do it, you can generate a .exe file where you can copy and share through jump drive or email. The second way you can create a file, you can send a file to the web where you can send a link to the client so they can preview the model on any computer as long as they have internet access. So basically, this is what it looks like if you have a standalone model. It's going to look identical to your Enscape scene. It's also going to have auto view. The main difference is like it's also have this setting tab to the left where you can change all your settings here as well. So basically, this small program, this standalone program will have all the function Enscape has. And it will render everything as what you see from your model directly, but also you can also change the different modes from this standalone program. And also you can also change the visual setting here. You can also save a preset. So whenever you get a file, when they open it up, they can see what file you want them to preview. But there's one downside because this program contains whole model. So it could be a little challenging sometimes because you're giving them the whole model to preview. So for instance, if you only want to see, you set up those 4 views, those views you want them to see, but if you give them this whole file, they can really go to everywhere in this model to look at this whole site by themselves. So sometimes you want to have a little bit restriction applied to the model and only allow them to see what they wanted to see or you want them to see. That's where you can use the next function that I want to mention is the 360 panorama view, which again is also under capture here. It's right here, which will create a 360-degree image of the scene. So it will look just like that. It will render a 1:2 ratio square box, normally 8192 by 4096, which is pretty high res for this purposes. So what you need to do is there's a platform called RunMe. There's also other platform called like Go Through or Panel 2 VR. But I'm just going to show Run Me for now for this exercise. So this is what you're gonna see if you bring the 360 image into Run Me. So basically, you can still have the aerial view of the whole image, but again, you can't move around. This is the specific view you want them to see, but also you can create other points where they can basically double click and transition into other point. But you're giving them a little bit more restriction to only allow them to see what you want them to see, which a lot of times works better. And also you can zoom a little bit. Actually, I think I disabled the zoom, but you can control how much you want them to zoom and also to pan, or basically you have a lot more control on this model. And one thing you can do here is you can also add more information or annotation into this model. So if I go to my view right here, so like you see here, I created like 5 teleport points where they can move around, but also there's also this small mark here. So basically you can plug in anything you want here. You can put some annotation if there's anything you want them to see, or maybe you can put your FAR in this project, or you can, right here I'm just showing some renderings, but you can also click, if you have a pre-rendered animation, you can also put your animation here. Apparently you can adding more images, or you can have everything together. So basically this is your clipping board where you can exchange information and showcase whatever you want to show in this model. Another thing you can do here, you can apparently do music stuff, but I mean, we're not going to cover that for this time. But one thing you can do is it can also shows a sitemap of where the view has been taken. So basically all those views are linked to each other. So if you go to other views, the same information will be applied. The same information will applied here. Actually, I don't think I've set it up here as well, but the same information where you see the question mark or the annotation mark, the rendering, they could just pop up at the same location if you have a different view or a different scene setup. So this is a very intuitive way to basically use your model and also share something really quickly. Apparently this is a web-based program, so you can just copy the link and send it to other people, and they will get a chance to see the progress. And also the ability to control the view or the scene, and also to control the zoom in and zoom out. It's a pretty good feature to basically allow them to see what you want them to preview, instead of having them kind of move around the whole model. That's kind of the main advantage of using Run Me versus a standalone version or the web version of Enscape. So the next thing, or the last thing I want to mention, is the VR capability. We can demonstrate here, but just so you know, Enscape is capable for VR, and we do have all the equipment and gears in a BIM room. And we have used it a couple of times, which I would say is pretty positive. The feedback was pretty great. We were able to make a decision a lot quicker, but it does require some time to set up the model. So I would say if you ever want to use VR, maybe just talk to somebody from BDC or Thomas Love to get him approved or set up the gear prior so you can use the VR capability for a meeting. Okay, that's pretty much all I want to cover for Enscape navigation and ways to use the Enscape model.